Having a wonderful day or night. Today I'm going to explain logical operators to you in Python. This is going to cover AND operators, OR operators, and NOT operators. Before watching this video, I highly recommend that you click on the link in the description. It'll take you to my if statement videos. If statements and what is covered in them is going to be used a lot in this video. So just watch the video and practice it on your own and then watch this, because 90% of this are if, else, and elif statements. So without further ado, let us begin. Let's first of all start off with AND operators. So let's start with num1, or number 1, equals 10. If num1 equals 10 and num1 does not equal 15, print yes. So what just happened for the yes to be the output? Well, the first thing is you assign the variable a value. Assign the variable, and the variable is num1. The variable stores a value, and for more complicated problems in Python, especially with lists, it's just easier to use a variable rather than type out every single value. So you assign the variable a value, and the value is 10. Now on line 2, you ask a question. Ask the question. So if num1 equals 10 and num1 does not equal 15, print yes. With AND statements, both conditions have to be true. So num1 is 10, so 10 does equal to 10, and 10 does not equal 15. So the results are printed. However, suppose one value is wrong. Suppose I said 10 does not equal to 10, and 10 equals 15. The code isn't wrong, it's just incomplete, because if the conditions aren't met, you have to add an elif or an else statement. Even if one part is wrong, then the code doesn't run. So let's put an elif statement in. An elif statement is very similar to an if statement. You use it to ask a question. So num1 is greater than or equal to 10, and num1 is less than or equal to 11. Print maybe. So it's more or less the same thing. We're using the variable and the value up top, but since the if statement does not meet the proper conditions, you use the elif statement. So elif 10 is not less than 10, but it is equal to, so it's technically true. It's greater than or equal to. And 10 is less than or equal to 11, so it all checks out. Now you could add 1 million elif statements. You can put as many elif statements as fit on the page. However, suppose the if statement is true and the elif statement is true. Let me change this. So both the if and elif statements are true, yet only the if statement is printed. That's because it goes from a top down. So if the if statement is true, none of the elif statements are true, even if there's 100 and they're all correct. But suppose the if statement isn't true and all the elif statements are true. It goes from top down. The first is printed rather than all the other ones. And suppose the if statement isn't true and the first 50 elif statements are true. So the 51st elif statement is true, all the way to 100 is true, only the 51st would be true, so it's a top down. Now suppose both the if and all the elif statements are not true, then the else statement is used. Once again, the code isn't wrong, it's just incomplete since the conditions aren't perfectly met. Unlike the if and elif statements, the else statement just prints something. And whenever you're printing something, you always put it in parentheses. Now, OR operators are very similar. So if num2 is greater than or equal to 10, or num2 is greater than or equal to negative 5,000, print high. Now this is more or less the same thing. You start off with assigning the variable which is num2 a value which is 20. Now down here you're asking a question. Asking the question. I'm gonna change this I'm gonna change this down here so it aligns up here. Ask the question. So num2 equals negative 20. So if num2 or negative 20 is greater than or equal to 10, that statement is false. However, negative 20 is greater than negative 500. Now what makes an OR statement different than an AND statement is that only one condition has to be true. With an OR statement, it's operator, not statements. Forgive me, it's operators, not statement. Let's suppose both statements are false. Let's suppose both statements are true. It still runs. Let's suppose both statements are false, then we'd have to use an elif statement. And the rules for elif statements are the same as the ones before. It's top down. If the if statement is correct, it doesn't matter how many elif statements are correct, only the if statement gets proved. So the first, you could say, value on the totem pole, the first statement on the totem pole that meets the conditions is printed, while everything else below it is ignored, even if it's true. So elif number 2 does not equal 3/5 or num2 equals 500, print the sky is the limit. So it's kind of the same thing. You're using the variable and value from the top, and you're using it to ask a question. And as long as only one condition is met, it prints the value. Now suppose this was totally false. Then we would have to use an else statement. So and or operators are the same thing, basically, except with an and operator, both conditions have to be true, while with an or operator, only one condition has to be true. Let's do something a little bit different, not operators. So num3 equals 30. If not num3 does not equal 30, print bingo. Now, now it's largely the same thing at first. You assign the variable is num3, a value, which is 30. And at the start of the second line, it's largely the same. You ask the question. Now, you notice number 3 is 30. Saying 30 does not equal 30 is false. That's like saying The sky isn't blue. For a not operator to be true, the conditions have to be false. For the not operator to work, the conditions have to be false. Suppose I said number 30 equals 30, it wouldn't print. Once again, it's not wrong, it's just the formula is incomplete. So the elif statements come back. Elif not num3 is less than or equal to 15, print score. 30 is obviously greater than 15, so saying it's less than 15 is false, so it gets printed. But so as we said it was greater than or equal to 15, it wouldn't print. And once again, the rule of the elif and if statements are true. If the if statement is true, no elif statement is printed, and the first elif statement is true is printed, while everything else below it, whether true or false, isn't printed. And if none of those are printed, the else statement is used, which doesn't ask any questions unlike the if and elif statements. Now let's mix them all together. You don't have to do this just with numbers, you can also do it with words. So color equals red. And I have to put it in parentheses for it to work. So if color does not equal blue and color equals red, print bright. So it's kind of the same thing. You assign the variable. In this case, the variable is color, a value, which is red. And then you ask the question, and then you print the results. This is the same thing, but with words instead of numbers as the value. Now here we're going to combine it and, or, and not operators in one area. So I'm going to change this a little to say color equals blue, which is obviously false. So we're going to bring in an elif statement. Elif color equals yellow, or color does not equal yellow. Print darkness. And once again, it's the same thing. You're using the variable and value from the start and using it to ask a different question. Color does not equal yellow since it equals red. In this team, it's true color does not equal yellow. So suppose I want to use a not statement. Elif not color equals orange. Print weird. Weird. So the if and the first elif statement, their conditions aren't met, so it goes down to the third one. And with not statements, the conditions have to be false, and color doesn't equal orange, so it doesn't work. Now suppose I said color doesn't equal orange, then that's not working. And finally, to top it off, I'm going to put an else statement. Print, thanks for watching. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching, and please tell me how I can do better in the comments section. So thank you, have a good day, have a good night, you're welcome.